in some garden and drinking wine. Anyway, I'm very grateful that you came. And since we are recording the talk and publishing on our website, I'm sure that many people will benefit of this extraordinary occasion to have a very special guest here tonight. Please welcome with me Ebtesam Al-Ketbi, who is the president and the founder of the Emirates Policy Center and the professor for political science at the United Arab Emirates University. Welcome, Ebtesam. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Our dear old friend Guido Steinberg is with us. He's our brother, so many of you know him since many years. Guido is a senior associate at the Africa and Middle East Research Division at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik in Berlin. And of course, Walter Posch, the curator of the series Hegemonies and Alliances, which is a program, ongoing program since 2015, if I am right, Walter. Okay? Yeah. I think till 2015. I'm never good in math. We are regularly organizing talks with special guests, and we are at least once a year organizing a huge conference, a big conference on hegemonies and alliances in the Middle East and in the Gulf region. I think that everybody was very thrilled when on March 10 the news came out of this very unexpected statement that Riyadh and Tehran will reestablish diplomatic relations. And I think all of us, or many of us, have hopes and ideas, and I'm very grateful that we can discuss these hopes and ideas tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gertrude. Thank you for the welcome, and thank you also for the introduction that leaves me with only very, very few words of introducing. It has already been mentioned that Guido is a long-standing friend and guest, and we hope to convince Her Excellency Al-Ketbi to visit us more often after this meeting, inshallah. What I would like to underscore is that what you said before, that is the big surprise of all of us. At least I have an excuse not to look too close to the Saudis because I'm too much focused on Iran, but I didn't see this event coming. And I think also one reason why we don't see often things not coming is because we don't talk to the right people. And I had to see this when I traveled to the Emirates last time, a little bit in the spirit of the former Chancellor Bruno Kreisky, who talked to the Arabs. And in a way, this is the way the dialogue should be run. If I look at the international community in the last 20 or so years, we were talking with the Iranians, we were talking with the Turks about the Iranians, we were talking with the Americans about the Iranians, but we never were talking seriously with the Arab neighbors about Iran. And that is, I think, one of these mistakes which we cannot do away what happened the last 10 and 15 years, but we shall never repeat again. And since we were also surprised, I would like to ask Ebtesam for her presentation and her introducing words before we can then open up for a greater discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for this invitation and for having me here. I'm honored and privileged, and with my distinguished colleague, Guido. Well, I will take a holistic approach, which I will look to the security structures in the Middle East. So there are many developments, and we will talk about the latest approachment between Iran and Saudi and the Chinese mediation. Well, somebody is saying, well, this security architecture is a mirage. Okay, it will not be, or it's not sustainable, and it will not happen. And I would say that the growing new dynamics that might reshape the Middle East are not a mirage. However, they are fragile. And there is no complete agreement on these dynamics. Some might see them as unfair arrangements or arrangements by the powerful at the expense of the weak. The arrangements are fragile because the ongoing new compromises and reconciliation have yet to fulfill the requirement to become sustainable and robust, which I will point towards later in this intervention. Now, the zero-sum games that characterize the behavior of action and position of competing regional actors in recent years in the Middle East failed to achieve the aspired outcome. All of them came to a conclusion: nobody can take the whole cake. And in recent years, all countries, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, my country, Qatar, and also Iran, realized they could not fulfill their agendas. They also realized that returning to diplomatic and economic solution is more feasible and urgent than military ones. Almost all countries are convinced of feasibility of de-escalation. And this is the main reason we have this de-escalation right now in the region. The zero-sum game did not work, so they are trying win-win situation. Might be more or better for them. Now, of course, global shifts led their impact on the choices of regional actors. Great power competition is at the top of this shift. But the Sudan issues seems an exception or a controversial case in this context. Now you have this environment of de-escalation. Now then you have an escalation coming from that area. So, I mean, sticking to the military solution to impose political conditions and exert influence. So, despite several calls for calm and dialogue, until now, none of these ceasefire worked. Until now, until today. It doesn't last even 24 hours. So the calm, de-escalation, and reconciliation environment has not also included the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's not, in fact, it's not de-escalated. And this is a fundamental weakness in the Abraham Accords. There are also no prospects for a diplomatic and sustainable solution for the Renaissance Dam between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. This is another issue, that part not resolved. It's not yet known whether the armed conflict in Sudan would complicate this or facilitate the path for dialogue among rivals on this issue. In strategic calculation, the Abraham Accords have led to a significant shift in the geopolitics of the Middle East and North Africa. This is a fact we cannot deny. It has created a new structure for any security approach or plans, as there are constant attempts to align Washington's priorities, goals, and interest in the Middle East with those of its regional partners. And of course, Washington's, when it moved Israel to the CENTCOM, it means that this region should take care of himself. I mean, trying to solve their conflicts between each other. Now, UAE strategies and plans cannot work without regional stability and cooperation, as regional turmoils and crises harm its interests. So that's also UAE tried to de-escalate and to pull itself from all these areas where it's intervened, and it has been approached with Iran before Saudi. So from this perspective, the China-broked Saudi-Iran deal in March 2023 was welcomed widely. The ground was paved for such a mediation. But, however, the actual judgment on feasibility and importance of these talks and agreement is not about holding it, which a positive indication anyway, but it has to do with its resulting agreements still. Now we are in the honeymoon. These agreements should enhance regional stability, open cooperation channels among countries in the region, and help solve intractable crises in Yemen, in Lebanon, Syria, and elsewhere, now in Sudan as well. So a strong link between Iran-Saudi negotiations and developments related to Iran nuclear issues is most likely any breakthrough in the currently posed, which is now, it's going slowly, the nuclear talks with Tehran the American and the European, will of course make a push for that Iran-Saudi dialogue. Why? Because if the American sanctions is there, that economic relation, it will not work. I mean, Saudi, they announced that they are going to invest in Iran infrastructure money, but they have to navigate where is the area is not under sanction. So experience shows that one of the main reasons behind the failure of Iran's 2015 nuclear deal was that it did not require Iran to change its behavior in the region. That was just the main issue with the American and European that time. It's only the nuclear issues. And they didn't pay attention for the regional, for the GCC concern about the proxies and the missiles at that time. So it also did not address Iran's constant interference in the internal affairs of the Gulf and Arab countries through its militias and proxies, and also its support for militias and development of ballistic missiles and drones. Iran's nuclear military capability have become a more severe and dangerous challenges now, especially with its involvement in the Ukrainian war. So there might be an important chance to bring these two issues to the negotiation table and draw lessons. So dialogue can significantly promote regional cooperation and confidence building measures and lead to win-win solution. It can also help us agree on specific arrangement to shape a collective and sustainable regional security structure. But the tone of optimism faces multiple challenges, but it is not impossible. However, regional actors must refrain from seeking hegemony and instead opt for win-win formula as much as possible. Now, regarding this deal, how much the Iranians are going, until now, they did not give anything, only their order to Houthi to stop their missiles and their drone against Saudi. Okay, so the reconciliation, this is the main concern of Saudi, but they are not willing to give up their nuclear program, their missiles, their drone, their intervention. This is nothing has been changed. So I look at it, it's not win-win. Until now, it's not win-win. It's de-escalate in some area, but the other areas is still there. So also, the other reason, the shift of U.S. vision towards the Gulf and Middle East has impelled regional countries to look for economic integration between arrangement and establish understanding and partnership from within the region to enhance regional stability. So Gulf Iran de-escalation is part of this arrangement and understanding. In fact, when the American announced, since Obama, pivoting to Asia, and of course, after the deal, 2015 done, the American allies in the region felt upset and disappointed, and because they thought that they will be left without security umbrella, so they try to diversify their strategic partnership, and they are looking to Asia. And that's why they started their relation with India, with China, with Korea, to balance their relation with, and create some of mistrust, especially in the case of Saudi and UAE, when they have been attacked by Iranian drones or its proxies, the US, they did not react directly after that. And this is, let them feel that, oh, US is not any more credible in terms of protecting them. So if Iran is there, why not reconcile with Iran? The other issue also for reconciliation was Israel. When the Israelis were threatening that they are going to attack Iran, the Gulfists knows that any retaliation from the Iranian side will be against them. It will not be against Israel. Not, of course, US is far away. It will be directly against them. And this is when, in the hidden, I would say, what pushed these countries towards that de-escalation with Iran. But the arrangement for regional integration and cooperation, I would summarize it, include Abraham Accord, Nagaf Forum, summits of Sharm el-Sheikh and Al-Aqaba, New Levant, which they call it Mashriq project between Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan. And there is also the I2U2 initiative, which bring Israel and India and UAE together for a collective project. And there is also, which we call it the UAE, India, France Trilateral Cooperation Initiative. And there is also a talk of potential infrastructure project led by United States, including Saudi and UAE and India, that would link India to GCC and Arab countries via railways using regional shipping ports. This is something new. And also Washington adopts some strategic initiative in the Middle East due to China growing influence in the region, which lies at the heart of Beijing-led Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, that mediation, Chinese mediation, of course, the Chinese has a good relation between both Saudi and the Iranian, but I would say this is a big failure for two. For the American, because they're always fighting Chinese presence in the region, and this has happened, and present China as a stabilizer factor in the region, vis-a-vis US comes always with war and intervention. The second, it's a big failure for Israel, because the Iranian, by this, distance Saudi from normalizing with Israel and from joining with Abraham Accord. And these two are the losers, I would say, in this circumstances. The regional initiative, while it's going beyond Middle East, they face two significant challenges. The first, the need to address Palestinian cause by supporting the two-state solution, as also Palestinians should not be a loser in the ongoing regional agreement. In fact, UAE, when it signed Abraham Accord, when it marked normalization with Israel, it was that based that the peace and stability is coming, and it will include also Palestinian as a winner from this agreement, which it did not happen. And I said this in Herzliya. I was 1 month ago when I've been asked, I said, what's happening, the violence now, and this type of government, in fact, it is, nobody is going to join Abraham Accord. Nobody will normalize with this, because the reason you are marketing this, that you are bringing stability and security in the region, which is also including the Palestinians. Now, also don't get me wrong, bilateral relation, of course, every one of those signatories condemning what's happening now, including my country. But on bilateral basis, things is going fine. I mean, in terms of that cooperation in economy, in AI, in health, this is going people to people. There is no issue. But as when we look at in the big picture, this is what happened. The second challenge is the allying the Abraham Accords and the GCC-Iran rapprochement may seem challenging. Well, now, okay. Yes, it will reduce the intensity of regional conflict, bridge differences, and perhaps lead to regional security cooperation, but with UAE, it did the rapprochement with Iran after signing the Abraham Accord and balancing its relation with both. I don't know the Saudi, how they are going to do that, because what is different that with the Saudi, the Yemen is something they needed to solve it and get out. This issue it's not when UAE de-escalate with Iran, it didn't need anything like that. So this is the issue that might be antagonize Iranian and to ask the Houthi or others, even they will say by mistake a drone or whatever. So, and also the Chinese mediation between Riyadh and Tehran is a test and may open the door for a new approach to aligning these two moves. It is also a test how the US and Europe can contribute to that alignment. This is also, is it by cooperating, is by trying to take back their role in the region. So some observers argue that Beijing growing presence in the Middle East and China's broke deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran have even strengthened lines of communication between Washington and Riyadh, and this is fact. Now, Washington's trying, you know that the world, Biden described Saudi before the pariah. Now, every single day there is a visit either on different level, going to Riyadh, trying to get Riyadh back. And this is also made Riyadh put a very high price condition or they want. If you want me to go back, if you want me to normalize it, so I need F-35, I need so, and so it's not an easy job. I will conclude by saying the new dynamics in the Middle East regional structure advocate realistic competition management. Moreover, the prevention of conflict spillover will continue and expand further. These trends are real and not illusion. But however, it will take more time before one can talk about a new regional security architecture and comprehensive and sustainable stability that can address a deep-rooted causes of crisis emerging from time to time. As the focus is often placed on rapid crisis management rather than comprehensive and fair solution, because if you don't go to the root cause for any conflict, it will look like you are giving a painkiller rather doing surgical treatment for the crisis. I'm sorry if I went so detailed and long, and thank you.
Thank you very much. This gives a lot to think. I made a lot of notes, and I will address a couple of questions afterwards. I like this point of a security architecture not yet born or in flux and so on. Having co-invented the hegemonies and alliances idea for the Middle East, I think it's very, very fitting, and it changes also a little bit of our hitherto hedged assumptions. Guido, Iran and Saudi Arabia. I've been looking to Iran, you've been looking to Saudi Arabia. Why didn't we get it right in the first place, that there is an agreement? So let's do some mea culpa. You can take my part too.
Yeah, but perhaps we are, or we have been right after all, simply because, as Ebtesam said, not so much has happened yet, in spite of the agreement. I am personally quite skeptical about about the agreement itself and whether it will gain any substance in the coming months and years. But anyhow, first I will talk about the détente between the two countries and the reasons for it. I believe that what we have been seeing in the region, or that the rapprochement between the two countries, is a direct result of problems that the two protagonists have. On the one hand, we do have Saudi Arabia, which has realized already early on in 2019 that it couldn't stick to its prior policies with regard to Iran. There was a virtual Cold War going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran on the one hand, plus its allies, including the United Arab Emirates, and Iran and its proxy groups on the other hand, ever since 2011. And it was a proxy war, or it was a Cold War that was close to escalating after 2015. And the moment the Saudi Arabian leadership realized that this is not going to work was the 14th of September 2019, when Iran, from wherever, attacked Saudi oil installations in Khurais and Abqaiq in the eastern province. You might remember the holes in the oil installations at that time. Ever since, Saudi Arabia has been asking for talks. Talks did take place in Iraq. Talks did take place in other parts, but Iran was not ready to compromise. Saudi Arabia was, the United Arab Emirates was, simply because both countries realized that they simply couldn't confront Iran anymore. I still remember this very impressive speech by Hezbollah General Secretary Hassan Nasrallah at that time, when he said, look at your glass cities. Yeah, you might remember that. Mudun az-Zujaj. It was very, very strong, because if you listen to the term, Ebtesam, you are from Dubai, what I did, I think you thought the same. Well, they might be talking about Dubai. They might be talking about Abu Dhabi. They might be talking about Doha and other parts. So simply, Saudi Arabia had lost in the face of its conflict with Iran, and it was begging for a compromise. Iran at that time was not ready. Iran agreed to talk to the Saudis, but at the same time, the Houthis kept attacking Saudi Arabia time and again. And early last year, even the United Arab Emirates. I think it was in January 2022. What changed in 2022 to make the Iranians accept to talk to the Saudis, and I believe not only to talk to the Saudis, but compromise? And I think it's two reasons. First, the protest movement, which was probably not a threat to the Islamic Republic, but it showed that this regime is losing parts of its legitimacy. Secondly, with the end of the negotiations over the nuclear program, over the renewal of the nuclear agreement of 2015, Iran lost every prospect of getting rid of the sanctions in the near future. So we did see, well, Iran was ready to compromise as well. I do not know exactly what part the Chinese mediation might have played, but the weakness of the two main actors is the reason why they sat together and compromise. My second point, I see this as a phase in a conflict. We are entering a new phase in the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. If you take a look at the history of the conflict, it started in 1979 and developed in 4 phases. The first phase of the 1980s, I would call it the first Cold War, although, well, when Saudi Arabian-Iranian relations were at their lowest for, I don't know, for centuries probably. Anyhow, it was a phase of conflict. Then we do see a major détente in the 1990s, which didn't work out so well simply because Iran had a secret nuclear program, because Iranian proxies attacked the US Army in Khobar. You might remember the big terrorist attack in 1996, and so on. But it was a phase of détente. Then we see, well, escalating tensions in the 2000s, which escalated into a virtual Cold War after 2011 and 2015. And if we want to understand what is going on today, I think it's good to take a look at the 1990s. We might see a similar détente for years, perhaps even a decade, but at the same time, the conflict will still be there. The conflict is there between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the agreement that we have seen has not solved any major problem between the two countries. It does have a certain potential to help solving conflicts, for example, in Yemen, and that's extremely positive that the war in Yemen has calmed down even more than it already did between 2019 and 2022. But still, the conflict is still there, and it will remain there, and I believe, until one of the two regimes falls, either the Saudi Arabian one or the Islamic Republic. I think it's up to you to decide which one should go first. I don't know. I have no idea. Anyhow, and I don't even think that I would prefer any of the two scenarios. My third point is, what is new now? What is the difference between the situation in the 1990s and the situation today? And I think the major difference is the international situation. The United States is not withdrawing from the Middle East, but there is a widespread perception that it is retreating and retrenching. And I think that is correct. If you take a look at the foreign policies of the last 3 American presidents, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, they would probably agree on one point. Let's get rid of all these problems in the Middle East. We don't want any troops in Iraq. We don't want any troops in Afghanistan. We want to concentrate on the big competition of the 21st century, which will take place in the Pacific between the United States and China. Okay, fair enough. That has been seen as a withdrawal from the Middle East by Middle Eastern countries. But now something is changing with the agreement. China is entering the Middle East, and that is so new. So even if there was a trend in the United States, in political Washington, to withdraw from the Middle East, but at the same time there is this perception that the United States is entering a competition with China, what does the political appearance of China in the Middle East, in Saudi-Iranian relation, mean for the United States? And I would bet that we see enhanced diplomatic, political, military activity by the United States in the coming years, if only to keep its allies in its own camp, which I think is good news for countries or governments in the United Arab Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, and Israel, and so on. I do believe that the US will not withdraw from the region, if only to keep major countries from getting too close to China and perhaps other rivals like Russia, if you take Russia seriously. I do. Perhaps, well, for a couple of months, I think. So that was my question, what is new, number one, and my question, what is new, number two. I think something else has changed in the region, and that is Saudi and also Emirati behavior. And that's partly as a reaction to what is perceived as a US withdrawal by both these governments. And we do see a Saudi Arabia that is somewhat different. If you take a look at 2022, Saudi Arabia was asked by the American government to reduce its output of oil, to raise its output, I always mix it up, to raise its output of oil in order to reduce the price, simply because prices were too high in the United States, in Europe, as you have all experienced. And I think for the first time in decades, Saudi Arabia proved to be, let's say, not utterly ready to help the United States. That's absolutely new. That is something new. Just take a look at major crises in the past. Whenever the United States asked the Saudi government to change its oil policies simply because of a major crisis. Just think of the Iraq War in 1990, 1991. Saudi Arabia was always ready to increase production or to reduce production according to need. In 2022, although the United States entered a major crisis, its allies entered a major crisis with the war in Ukraine, Saudi Arabia didn't cooperate. And that shows us that something is happening in the region. The Saudi Arabian government might simply argue, oh, well, we do need the money. We need it for our own economy, which is, of course, correct, but we do see a government, a Saudi Arabian government, that has decided to fundamentally change its foreign policies and, well, behave in a way like a non-aligned power in the 1950s or the 1960s. Although still very much dependent on American security cooperation, I think that's a euphemism. Saudi Arabia is as dependent, utterly dependent on the United States military, on United States protection, just as countries like here in Europe, Germany is, and Austria. Although people have told me you're neutral. But of course, we all depend on the United States. So Saudi Arabia does, but at the same time has entered quite a complicated balancing act, which seems to be the foreign policy strategy of Saudi Arabia for the coming years. And that is changing. Why is it changing? I think it has got to do with the events of 2019, when Saudi Arabia realized, when after this attack on the oil installations, there was no American military intervention forthcoming, Saudi Arabia decided, well, we can't rely on the United States as we did in the past, so let's hedge our bets. I think a second reason is that Saudi Arabia has realized how successful other countries are with such a policy. Just look at Turkey. It's a NATO member, at least that's what people say, and at the same time, it's not cooperating. It's damaging our interests. I'm sorry, this is not an Austrian debate, but from a German transatlanticist perspective, it's a catastrophe, the way Turkey has acted. But still, Turkey is reaping the profit of its policies with regard to Russia and Ukraine, even with regard to the what is trigo? These Getreidelieferungen.
Cereal.
Yeah. Well, you would know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, it's not losing United States protection. And perhaps the model has been Qatar as well. Although Qatar has acted against the United States interests time and again, it has even been named a major non-NATO ally quite recently. So again, it is profiting from the protection that is awarded it by the United States and its allies, but at the same time, it's quite free in its alliances, in its relations to countries that are sworn enemies of the United States. So, anyhow, what still remains are the baselines of conflict, and it is still I said that in the beginning, that is why I'm skeptical. In spite of everything that has changed in the international and the regional dimension, it's still a systemic conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We do see a monarchy against a republic, a conservative against a revolutionary power, a pro-Western against an anti-Western, anti-imperialist power. And it's still a Shia versus a Sunni power. Plus, Iran is striving for hegemony and has scored major successes in the last decade, while Saudi Arabia is rather a status quo power that has been losing since 2015. That's not really a basis for a long-term agreement, I think. Plus, there is a new factor now coming in. Iran is not only a power striving for hegemony, but it's also a nuclear threshold power. And that is changing the region fundamentally. My belief is that Saudi Arabia has entered this agreement in a time of weakness in order to prepare for the next stage. From a Saudi point of view, you cannot accept that your big neighbor, your sworn enemy, acquires a nuclear weapon. And if it's only the fact that Iran is reaching the nuclear threshold, it doesn't have to construct a warhead in order to trigger these Saudi policies. And I believe that Saudi wants to catch up now. They have realized we are in a state of weakness. How do we get out of there? And in order to conclude, I would suggest that you take a close look at the negotiations which are taking place at the same time between Saudi Arabia and the United States. You might have heard that Saudi Arabia and the United States are negotiating over a potential peace deal with Israel. So an Abraham Accord between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I don't think it's imminent for different reasons, the situation in Palestine being one of them, but these talks do take place right now, and Saudi Arabia has made clear what it wants. It wants a security guarantee by the United States. Secondly, it wants weapons systems. I don't know which ones, but probably the F-35, perhaps others, perhaps even the F-22 something that hasn't been exported to any country until now. And thirdly, it wants technological assistance for, lo and behold, a civilian nuclear program, meaning uranium enrichment, as civilian as the Iranian nuclear program. And I think it tells us where this, in which direction the Saudis are thinking. They want to catch up. They want to go nuclear, just as Iran does. If Iran builds the nuclear warheads, they will go the same way. They want missiles, they want a security guarantee, they want all the things in order to be able to confront Iran on equal terms. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, both of you. I have noticed some points you had said in common. The first one is, for me, is what is your take of the role of China really? Because sometimes you can read it also as some kind of Iran and Saudi have already decided to go for rapprochement and use China as some kind of fig leaf or window dressing. On the other hand, others tell us that the contribution of Chinese diplomacy was substantial. If this is the case, then we really have to conclude that China is already part, at least in the Gulf region, on a very, very substantial level. But the picture from our perspective, which is certainly not the only one, is a little bit contradictory. I would appreciate if you could pinpoint or flag it out how we should read the Chinese role in these negotiations or in this deal, and what do we exactly know about it? Is this something promoted by the People's Liberation Army? Is it a diplomacy supported? What do we know about the Chinese role, really? And I'm quite surprised to see so little in international media written about the Chinese details, whereas we read a lot about Iranian details, the role of Shamkhani, and so on. A second point I would ask both of you to go into a little bit more. You're both very skeptical, at the same time cautiously optimistic, and focusing on when it comes to the Iranian-Saudi bilateral side of it. Could it be that both sides, the Saudis and the Iranians, do not control entire, or at least that the Iranians do not really control part of their proxies? So it was not for the Iranians rather easy to give up on the Houthis because they didn't control them really in the first place. When you read Iranian papers, you always would realize that while the Supreme Leader said this would be a wise policy, the Houthis do something else. And what I find so very astonishing is, when the Houthi issue became important, you could read in Iranian quality magazines, also strategic magazines, who are these people? While their side, the Saudis are Shiite, I always thought they are Sunni. You could hear this even from Iranian diplomats. So Yemen is, mentally speaking, much further away from Iran than Lebanon is. So it's really some place where the Iranians are not at home. Could it be a mutual effect? Yes, the 2019 role of the new Houthis, and then a kind of a realization of the Iranians that the Houthis are a force on their own and not so proxy-like as they and the Western media would like to have it. Perhaps if you could comment on this. Again, I may be totally wrong, but it's one of the questions that pops up. And then this big question of security architecture, or lack thereof, or potential of it. Is this an architecture you are flagging out directly or indirectly, which is about the management of the competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia? So in a way, keep Humpty Dumpty on the wall, because rivalry between Iran and Saudi was already before 1979. Just remember the Iranian Shahs and the 2,500 years celebration of Iranian monarchy. The Saudis would not come. I think they weren't even invited. So even when they're in the same camp, we had a severe rivalry, but we just did not see it in the Western eyes. So is it keeping Humpty Dumpty on the wall, or is this a potential of a partnership where really all the outgoing problems from Syria to Iraq to Yemen are addressed? So not a truce or a ceasefire after a military stalemate and a strategic pad situation, but really something active to contribute to peace for the sake of peace, which would be very altruistic. And finally, how did the Americans really react on this agreement or non-agreement or a situation beyond the level of newspaper readings we know? In a way, I find it hard to imagine what you indicated, Guido, and both of you. Yeah, you do. You do. That the Saudis would go for such a bold step in the sense of defiance of U.S. policies, or has it been indeed that? Because if this was a truce or an understanding in the spirit of defiance against the Americans, we may just wait a few months before there's an American answer, and not necessarily one everyone comprehends immediately. So I kept it with a lot of questions, both of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding China's role in the Middle East, this is not new, you know. At least Chinese has a strategy towards Middle East. The American, they don't have. Even the Russian, they don't have. But they have. They have through Belt and Road. So it's obvious they know what they want, using their soft power. Okay. Now, this soft power, and that was the question, by the way, we had just 2 weeks ago a workshop, Asia and Middle East. And China is one of them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the latest initiative also, Chinese initiatives towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, mm-hmm. Okay? So it shows, no, there is an appetite for the Chinese to represent themselves as a stabilizer, mm-hmm. factor, as a mediation factor. Okay, that it shows that the American, they are failed doing that, and from one crisis to another crisis, they are moving to mediate. Now, the question has been raised, or I raised this question for the Chinese participant, that it started with the economic interest, but always this needs something to protect. This is going to bring also Chinese military base, which it is in Djibouti, there to protect their interests in Africa. Will it is this stop on an economy? This is a question mark. We don't know what about the Chinese, but the fact on the ground that the Chinese, when they put their step in the region, the Americans were watching, by the way. It didn't happen while the Americans, they were not there. And they were happy that somebody is bearing the economic burdens. Okay, they are doing the mercantilise. It's okay. They were watching that. They were happy with that. When it came that way, so that no, the Chinese is going deeply and their relation, especially with the Gulf, okay, it's becoming more and more and more they started to compete, they start to put their conditions on this relation, especially with the Gulfs. Now, the Saudi, they saw the Chinese, they can. Look, there is 3 actors here. Saudi wants to exit from Yemen, and they cannot do that without reconciliation with the Iranian or without agreement with the Iranian. Okay? So they have to sit, but they need somebody to mediate between, and somebody has interest. The Chinese interest is to keep the oil falling safely and secure that. Okay? If there is conflict in the region, the oil transportation will not reach them. So this is another vis-a-vis also that, as I said, to show the American they are a player on the ground. For the Iranian, Guido, look, you have to know also something you said about the Saudi. First, this deal has been done not with the deep state. It's not IRGC, okay? It's not IRGC, it's Khamenei. It's Khamenei who wanted to do that deal, okay? And Khamenei, by the way, is looking east because he is no more trust the West, okay? The other thing also, so it's not with the deep state. And this is also,
well,
it shows...
Admiral Shamkhani was head of IRGC intelligence.
Look, that was, no. He has been asked by Khamenei, by IRGC. Okay. And this is the last role for him needed, then they kicked him out. Okay? This is what needed by Khamenei. This is one thing. The other thing, that the Saudi, they don't want to play the Sunni role anymore. That the Sunnis protector, Ummah, whatever. No. This is the new Saudi now. Okay? Whereas for entertainment, whereas... And so the glass cities, yeah, they are looking also to be a glass cities. But also this is something that when he said glass cities, yes, if any missile comes to these countries, they are losing a lot. But if this missile going to Iran, what they are going to lose? What is their infrastructure? Poor infrastructure they have. So that the other thing that the Iranian, Saudi, they are competing before on the regional role, which is not the case with the UAE, by the way. Okay, so now and Saudi, they want, as they said, zero problem. They want to focus on their own development. They don't want any more conflict. Iranian, they want to break the isolation and to open the market for their economy, to get more investment from the region in their infrastructure. But the question is, okay, now who can assure that this Gulf is monies going there, whereas a state does not respect the international law? If there is a dispute and Iran doesn't respect the international law, this money, of course, it will not go back to Saudi or anyone who will invest. This is the risky side of it. Now, regarding the nuclear program, by the way, this is, for the Gulfs, is not the most dangerous one, because they know that the Iranian, they want to be on the threshold to blackmail the West, okay? So they run after them to negotiate, please, don't go, don't enrich, whatever you want, we will give you so and so and so. Yes. But the concern of the Gulfs and Saudis, the proxies, the missiles, and the drones. because this has been reached. Okay? The nuclear program is the concern, is Israeli concern. More it's Israeli concern, but not us. Now, the American reaction. As I said, well, you know, here you talk about Mohammed bin Salman, okay? The guy who has been, I would say, insulted by Biden by saying this pariah country. And when he also came, he didn't show that he respects him. Okay. So this is kind of, I would say, revenge. It's kind of revenge. Now, will the American are willing to pay that price? This is, as you said, we don't know. Okay, are they willing? And will Saudi really normalize with Israel if they got all of these price? Also, this is, we don't know. Because Saudi's concerns, it's not like Emirates. They are the custodian of Holy Shrine. Okay, so how can, unless you get also, which always they are repeating, the Arab Peace Initiative, which is the Saudi Peace Initiative, can be implemented, or Israel agree on something or of that. The Houthis, I think I gave you the book. Yeah,
but this one I haven't read yet.
That's
that's the problem.
Your mistake. So you will not ask. In fact, look, Iranian invested, not only, they invest in any fiction through victimization. You see those, this Hamas are not, I mean jihad, sorry, and Hamas as well. They are Sunni, they are not Shia. But with Houthi, okay, they invested like they invested in Hezbollah, long time. They were giving them scholarship, going and come. They were not Shia, the 12. They were not 12. They were Zaydi. Okay? But the Iranian turned them to be the 12. So they make them a destabilizer factor, and proxies same like other. They will give up them? No, they will not. Of course, if I had a strong card, why I give up this card? I will keep it. I will blackmail you with it. Anytime if you didn't follow my conditions or my rules, I will use them. Like they are using Al-Hajj, like they are using Hezbollah. So I don't expect also that Iranian will give up in Syria. They are weak, not like before, but Syria is very important for them because they are in Iraq and Syria. It is beside Israel, okay? So it gives them a ground to be there beside Israel, okay? I don't think they will give up. In fact, we normalize with Assad to balance that Iranian and Turkish also presence there. And that's
Perhaps a word about the proxies, because I'm very much interested in this question. And I'm just trying to think whether the Iranians ever had a proxy which let them down. Might argue Hamas in 2012, although I'm not sure whether I would call Hamas an Iranian proxy.
No.
No, they are the masters of proxy warfare. And they have they have been for 40 years. Just look at Hezbollah and Iran. There hasn't been a single public conflict between the two sides in 41 years. That's incredible, between patron and a proxy, or patron and client. And so I'm always a little bit careful when I hear, well, that the relationship between the Houthis and Tehran is not so strong. And let's go back to this event in September 2019 again, when the Iranians, and I insist, the Iranians attacked the Saudi oil installations. What happened? The Houthis claimed the attack for themselves. Now think of that. The Houthis claimed an attack on the center of world oil production. They reduced the Saudi production for 2 weeks by 5.7 million barrels a day. That is more than 5% of world oil production. They invited an American retaliation by telling everybody, oh, this was us, but it wasn't them. If that is not a full-scale proxy, I don't know what a full-scale proxy is. And it made me think, because at the same time, of course, I know that the Houthis have their own agenda. Not all of them are convinced by 12-er Shiaism, although the Guards might have made some inroads in there and so on. I do believe, after what I witnessed in 2019, that the relationship between the Houthis and Tehran is a lot stronger than many of us believe. Question about China, I really don't know what happened. I have no clue. I hope that will change in the near future, but I have to confess I don't know it. And the last question that you posed about a security architecture, I don't see it on the horizon yet, simply because everything is so in flux. And I think what I would always suggest is always to take a closer look at what is happening between Saudi Arabia and the United States, rather than what is happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Because there is now ample evidence that not so much has happened between Iran and Saudi Arabia, although Yemen, of course, that's something substantial. But still, what is interesting right now is how do the Saudis, or will the Saudis get what they want? And secondly, what are they ready to pay? And I think that the whole situation in the region depends on the outcome of these negotiations a lot more, because it defines the nature of the conflict lines in the future. If you had asked me about, let's say, a year ago, 1.5 years ago, what the future of the region would be, I would have told you, well, the future is containment of Iran. The United States is giving up on the nuclear agreement. That was obvious already a while ago. They have decided that they want to contain Iran by, the usual set of measures. Sanctions, looking for allies, supporting allies with weapon systems, stationing military over there. And in a way, the alliance needed in order to start containing Iran was being built already in the Trump era. United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt. Well, who needs Egypt? But that's a different question. It has to be a functioning state in order to contain Iran. But this was the question. And to what extent are the Europeans cooperating? Not you guys in Austria, not Germany, but France and Britain, of course. Now, this is not gonna work anymore. If Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not taking part in containing Iran, there will be no effective containment of Iran. But that might change simply by Saudi Arabia getting as much as it wants. And I'm really curious what the outcome of the negotiations will be. I believe that the Biden administration is extremely keen on peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, however superficial that might be, and however remote the possibility might be based on reading what is happening in the Palestinian territories right now. But still, this is the big question, because it decides on whether the United States will be able to contain Iran or not. Yeah, and if it doesn't work, if we won't see a larger alliance agreeing on a containment policy, I really don't know what the alternative will be. It's,
well, you still have Afghanistan in the backyard of Iran, and the Iranians are very nervous about the Taliban in a way.
Well, we'll have lots of issues to study. I don't doubt that. Yeah. But whether there will be any baseline for the region that we can follow in order to explain what is happening, any organizing principle, I don't know.
No, look, the latest attack on UAE tanker, although we have this rapprochement, and of course it's done by IRGC. The reason because we have been joined the American alliance, the maritime security. Then when the American did not do anything, so we pulled out from that, because it shows also when we talk about how responsible American, playing that role. They are, yes, they didn't leave the region, but they are still only looking and not really play the role of that security guarantor. Okay, they're still selling arms, but when they are needed, they are not there. That's why when I'm saying people are questioning American credibility in terms of protection or security umbrella, and this also make a way for the Chinese to move. Okay, now even in Europe, and I heard that from ex-president, they're saying when we want to have a meeting with the American president, they keep us for 4 months until they come back to us. While with China, in 2 days we get that. And when we need economic aid, we don't get it. But in China, it's the second day it's coming. So how you play with your power, this is what give you leverage on others.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we still have time for 5 minutes or 2 questions or 3 questions and 3 minutes, or I don't know. You've been first, and then you, and then you, and then you. Yeah, please.
I thought it was very